A scream shatters the icy silence of Lac Glacé, where a blood-soaked body lies on a frozen lake. No footprints in sight. Welcome to The Murder on the Frozen Lake, Poirot's coldest case, a chilling whodunit. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and dive into the mystery. If you're hooked, subscribe. Your support means everything. Chapter 1. The Arrival in Winter's Grip. The steam train hissed to a stop at Lac Glacé, a Swiss village locked in a merciless winter, its snow-covered peaks gleaming under a pale December sun in 1925. Hercule Poirot, the world-renowned detective with his impeccably waxed moustache and piercing grey eyes, stepped onto the platform, his polished shoes crunching fresh snow. He'd been summoned by a frantic telegram from his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, who was staying at the opulent Ice Palace Hotel. The message was stark. Murder on the frozen lake. Urgent. Need your little grey cells. Poirot, never one to resist a puzzle wrapped in impossibility, had boarded the first train from Paris, his curiosity as sharp as the alpine wind now stinging his face. The village was a postcard of charm. Wooden chalets with icicle-laden eaves, locals gliding across the vast, mirror-like lake, and the faint sound of laughter from a distant skating rink. Yet an undercurrent of dread hung heavy, like frost clinging to pine branches. Hastings greeted him, his face ashen, his usual cheer replaced by a nervous twitch. "Poirot, it's ghastly," he said, pulling his scarf tighter. "Last night, during the hotel's winter ball, Victor Langdon, a rich industrialist, was found dead, stabbed on the lake's centre, a jewelled dagger in his heart, blood pooling on the ice, and not a single footprint leading to or from him. It's unnatural." Poirot's eyes glinted with that familiar spark of intellectual hunger. "Mon ami, the unnatural is merely the natural misunderstood. Let us proceed to the scene." They trudged through the snow to the Ice Palace Hotel, a grand edifice of dark timber and stained glass windows glowing like jewels against the white landscape. Inside, the air was thick with whispers and sidelong glances from staff and guests, all aware of the horror that had unfolded. The victim, Victor Langdon, was a man of wealth and enemies, a textiles magnate from Lyon. He'd arrived at Lac Glacé with his glamorous wife Elise, whose beauty was matched only by her penchant for drama. Rumours swirled of his ruthless business dealings, particularly with Herr Klaus Becker, a German rival whose factories Langdon had undercut. Then there was the enigmatic Russian countess, Irina Volkov, whose dark eyes and secretive smiles hinted at hidden motives. The hotel's manager, Madame Celeste Duval, a stern woman with a lineage tied to the lake's history, seemed to know more than she let on. Poirot's first stop was the crime scene, or rather its photographic record, as the body had been moved to the village morgue. The images were striking. Langdon lay sprawled on the ice, a ruby-encrusted dagger, stolen from the hotel's display of antiques, protruding from his chest. Crimson blood fanned out like a grim halo stark against the pristine snow. Most baffling, the ice around him was untouched. No tracks, no scuffs, no sign of approach or escape. How could anyone stab him out there and vanish? Hastings muttered, rubbing his hands for warmth. Poirot knelt by a map of the lake, his gloved finger tracing its edges. "The lake, it is not merely a stage, Hastings. It is a player in this drama. Its secrets are frozen, but not forever." He requested the guest list and began interviews in the hotel's oak-panelled lounge, where a roaring fire cast flickering shadows. Elise Langdon, draped in a fur stole, wept theatrically, claiming she'd been dancing with admirers all evening. Yet Poirot noticed her manicured nails digging into her palms, a sign of nerves. Becker, red-faced and reeking of last night's schnapps, admitted to a heated argument with Langdon over a contract, but swore he'd retired early. Countess Volkov deflected questions with cryptic charm, her accent thick as she spoke of fate's cold hand. Madame Duval, meanwhile, was brisk, insisting the killer must be an outsider, though her eyes darted to a locked cabinet where the dagger had been kept. Clues began to surface like cracks in the ice. A skate blade was missing from the hotel's rental shed, noted during a staff inventory. A crumpled note in Langdon's pocket, scrawled in elegant script, read, "The ice will crack at midnight." Whispers among the maids suggested Langdon had been seen arguing with a shadowy figure near the lake's edge hours before the ball. Poirot's mind churned as he sipped cognac by the fire, Hastings fidgeting beside him. "This is no crime of passion," Poirot mused. "It is precise, planned and tied to this frozen lake. Perhaps the ice itself holds the answer, or conceals it." As night fell, the snow thickened, and a distant howl, wolf or wind, echoed through the valley, hinting at danger still lurking. The stage is set, the players introduced, and Poirot's grey cells are just beginning to thaw the mystery. Join us next for the unravelling of secrets. Chapter 2. Shadows on the Ice. The morning after Poirot's arrival in Lac Glacé, the village woke to a sky heavy with grey clouds, casting an eerie pall over the frozen lake. Hercule Poirot stood in the Ice Palace Hotel's grand dining room, his small frame dwarfed by towering windows that framed the snow-draped Alps. He sipped a steaming espresso, his eyes scanning the breakfast crowd, guests whispering, their glances darting like minnows. The murder had stirred a hornet's nest of suspicion, and Poirot sensed the killer was among them, hiding behind a mask of civility. Today, he resolved to dig deeper into the web of motives, focusing on the cryptic note found in Victor Langdon's pocket. "The ice will crack at midnight." What did it mean, and who had written it? The answer, he suspected, lay in the relationships and rivalries simmering beneath the hotel's polished surface. Poirot began with a visit to the hotel's skating shed, a rustic structure near the lake's edge, where guests rented blades for gliding across the ice. The missing skate blade intrigued him. Could it be tied to the murder's impossible logistics? The shed's caretaker, a grizzled local named Pierre, scratched his beard and confirmed the inventory discrepancy. "One blade, gone since the night of the ball," he grumbled. "Good steel, too, from the old set we keep for fancy guests." Poirot examined the remaining blades, noting their sharp edges and sturdy leather straps. A single blade, detached from its boot, could be a tool or a weapon. He pocketed a loose screw found on the floor, its threads glinting oddly in the dim light, and thanked Pierre with a nod. Next, Poirot turned his attention to the hotel's antique collection, from which the jeweled dagger had been stolen. Madame Duval led him to the display room, her keys jangling as she unlocked the door. The cabinet, now empty of its prized dagger, held other relics, silver candelabras, a tarnished locket, and a faded map of Lac Glacé from the 18th century. Poirot's gaze lingered on the map, which marked a curious feature: a network of old tunnels beneath the lake, used long ago by smugglers. "These tunnels, madame," he asked, "are they still accessible?" Duval's face tightened. "Sealed decades ago. Dangerous, unstable. No one goes down there." Her curt tone piqued Poirot's interest, but he pressed no further, merely noting the map's details in his meticulous mental ledger. In the afternoon, Poirot gathered the key suspects in the lounge for informal questioning, his demeanour disarming yet razor-sharp. Elise Langdon, in a silk dress that screamed wealth, spoke of her husband's enemies. "Victor was ruthless in business," she admitted, her eyes dry despite her claims of grief. "He crushed competitors like Herr Becker without a second thought." Becker, overhearing, slammed his coffee cup down, his face flushing. "Accuse me all you like, Frau Langdon, but I was in my room, passed out from drink." His outburst drew stares, and Poirot noted the tremor in his voice. Anger or fear? Countess Irina Volkov, sipping tea with feline grace, offered little, only hinting at a past encounter with Langdon in Paris. He was persuasive, she said, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Poirot caught a flicker of unease in her posture when the dagger was mentioned. As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings walked the lake's edge, the ice gleaming under a rising moon. Hastings shivered, not just from the cold. "It's uncanny, Poirot. No tracks, a stolen dagger, a missing blade. What's the connection?" Poirot paused, staring at the frozen surface. "The connection, mon ami, is the lake itself. It is not just a grave. It is a canvas for the killer's art." He pointed to a faint irregularity in the ice, a patch slightly rougher than the rest, near where Langdon's body was found. Kneeling, he brushed away snow, revealing a hairline crack, barely visible. "This," he murmured, "is where the ice began to whisper its secrets." Back at the hotel, a maid confided in Hastings about a strange noise she'd heard near the lake at midnight, a low grinding, like stone on ice. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Was it the tunnels, the blade, or something else entirely? As the day ended, Poirot sat by the fire, sketching a timeline in his notebook. The note, the dagger, the blade, the tunnels, the crack. All pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. Yet, he felt the killer's presence, close and cunning, watching his every move. A soft knock at his door broke his reverie. A bellboy delivered an anonymous message. "Leave the lake or join Langdon." The threat only sharpened Poirot's resolve. The game was afoot, and the next move would reveal more of the killer's hand. The mystery deepens in the chapters to come. Chapter 3. Whispers Beneath the Ice. The third day in Lac Glacé dawned with a brittle chill. The village shrouded in a mist that curled off the frozen lake like ghostly tendrils. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the anonymous threat slipped under his door, donned his heavy coat and headed to the Ice Palace Hotel's library, a quiet room lined with leather-bound books and maps of the region. The cryptic message, "Leave the lake or join Langdon," burned in his mind, not as a deterrent, but as a clue to the killer's desperation. Whoever wrote it feared his progress, and Poirot's grey cells were now fully engaged, piecing together the puzzle of the murder's execution. Today, he aimed to unravel the significance of the lake's hidden tunnels and the strange grinding noise reported by the maid. Sensing they held the key to the impossible crime, Poirot began by examining the old map he'd seen in the antique display room, which he'd persuaded Madame Duval to lend him. The map, yellowed and creased, detailed a labyrinth of tunnels beneath the lake, once used by smugglers to move goods across the border. He traced the faded lines with a gloved finger, noting entrances near the village's edge, one suspiciously close to the hotel's grounds. "If these tunnels are truly sealed," he mused to Hastings, who hovered nearby with a skeptical frown, "why does Madame Duval grow so pale at their mention?" Hastings shrugged. "Perhaps she's just protective of the hotel's reputation." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Or she guards a secret that walks these passages still." To test his theory, Poirot enlisted Pierre, the skating shed caretaker, to guide him to the nearest tunnel entrance, marked on the map as a boarded-up shaft behind a derelict barn. The snow crunched underfoot as they approached, the barn's weathered planks sagging under fresh drifts. Pierre pried open a hidden hatch, revealing a dark, icy passage descending into the earth. "No one's been down here in years," he warned, handing Poirot a lantern. The detective descended alone, his breath visible in the frigid air. The tunnel was narrow, its walls glistening with frost, but he found fresh scuff marks on the stone floor. Someone had been here recently. At the tunnel's end, a rusty grate overlooked the lake's underside, the ice above glowing faintly blue. Poirot's heart quickened. A small, sharp object glinted in the dirt, a skate blade screw, identical to the one he'd found in the shed. Back at the hotel, Poirot shifted focus to the suspect's movements on the night of the murder. He cornered the head waiter, a nervous young man named Julian, who admitted to seeing Countess Irina Volkov slip out of the ballroom just before midnight, claiming she needed air. She headed toward the lake. Julian whispered, glancing around. I thought nothing of it. Guests often stroll there. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The Countess's evasiveness was becoming a pattern. He then questioned Elise Langdon's maid, Sophie, who revealed her mistress had a secret lover, a shadowy figure she'd met near the lake's edge during the ball. Madame was frantic that Monsieur Langdon would find out, Sophie confided, twisting her apron. Poirot filed this away, suspecting the note about the ice cracking might point to a betrayal, not just a murder. As dusk settled, Poirot and Hastings stood by the lake, where skaters twirled under lantern light. Poirot pointed to the rough patch of ice he'd noticed before, now faintly illuminated. Observe, Hastings. This irregularity is no accident. It suggests tampering, perhaps a weakening of the ice. He recalled the maid's report of a grinding noise, like stone on ice, and a theory began to form. What if the killer used the tunnels to access the lake's underside, manipulating the ice itself? The idea was audacious, but Poirot thrived on the improbable. He decided to test the ice's thickness tomorrow, with the help of a local ice cutter. As they returned to the hotel, a commotion erupted in the lobby. Herr Becker, flushed with anger, was arguing with Madame Duval over a locked storeroom key he claimed to need. "It's just my luggage," he barked. But Duval's refusal was firm, her eyes darting nervously. Poirot watched, sensing another thread in the tapestry of deceit. The killer was growing bolder, the threats more direct. But Poirot's resolve was ironclad. The lake was speaking, and he was listening. The next chapter promises to crack the ice further, revealing more of the murderer's cunning design. Chapter 4. The ice gives up. Its secrets. The fourth day in Lac Glacé broke with a rare glimpse of sunlight, casting a golden sheen over the frozen lake. Though the air remained sharp enough to bite, Hercule Poirot, ever precise, stood at the lake's edge, bundled in his woolen overcoat, his eyes fixed on the faint crack he'd discovered in the ice, the tunnels, the skate blade screw, and the grinding noise reported at midnight were coalescing into a theory. One that suggested the lake itself was not just a crime scene, but an accomplice. Today, Poirot aimed to test the ice's integrity and probe deeper into the suspect's alibis, sensing the killer's carefully laid plan was beginning to fracture under his scrutiny. Poirot enlisted the help of Marcel, a grizzled ice cutter who'd worked the lake for decades. Marcel arrived with a heavy auger, his weathered face etched with skepticism. "The ice is solid, monsieur," he insisted, tapping the surface. 3 feet thick, safe for skating. Poirot pointed to the rough patch near the murder site. "Humour me, monsieur. Drill here." Marcel obliged, boring into the ice with a steady rhythm. After several minutes he frowned, pulling up the auger. "Strange. It's thinner here. Barely a foot. Someone's tampered with it." Poirot's moustache twitched with satisfaction. The ice had been deliberately weakened, perhaps to stage the murder's impossible appearance. He collected a sample of the ice shavings, noting tiny flecks of metal embedded within, possibly from the missing skate blade. Back at the Ice Palace Hotel, Poirot turned his attention to the locked storeroom that had sparked Herr Becker's argument with Madame Duval. He persuaded Duval, with a mix of charm and insistence, to open it. Inside, he found crates of wine, old furniture, and, tucked behind a dusty curtain, a coil of rope stained with frost and dirt. "This rope," Poirot murmured, examining its frayed ends, "has seen recent use, perhaps in the tunnels." Duval's face paled, but she claimed ignorance, her hands fidgeting with her keys. Poirot didn't press her, yet, but the rope suggested a method for navigating the lake's underside, perhaps to manipulate the ice or move unseen. In the afternoon, Poirot sat with Countess Irina Volkov in the hotel's conservatory, where hothouse flowers bloomed despite the winter. Her composure was flawless, but her fingers toyed with a pearl bracelet when he mentioned her midnight stroll. "I sought solitude," she said coolly. The ball was stifling. Poirot pressed gently, noting her bracelet matched a pearl found near the lake's edge, logged by the police. A coincidence, surely, she replied, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of alarm. Next, he spoke with Elise Langdon's maid, Sophie, who revealed more about her mistress's lover. I saw them by the boathouse, she whispered. A man in a dark coat, but his face was hidden. Madame was terrified Victor would ruin her if he knew. Poirot's mind raced. Was the lover a suspect or a pawn in a larger scheme? As evening descended, Poirot and Hastings reviewed the timeline in the hotel's lounge. The fire casting long shadows, the weakened ice, the rope, the pearl, the lover, all pointed to a meticulously planned murder, not a spontaneous act. Poirot sketched a diagram of the lake, marking the tunnel grate and the murder site. The killer used the tunnels to access the ice's underside, he said, tapping the paper. They weakened it, staged the body, and left no tracks by retreating below. Hastings gasped. But who, Poirot? And why? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The why, mon ami, lies in Langdon's life, his wealth, his betrayals, his enemies. We must follow the threads of greed and passion. A sudden commotion interrupted them. A bellboy rushed in, breathless. Monsieur Poirot, there's been a break-in at the morgue. Someone tried to tamper with Langdon's body. Poirot sprang up, his mind alight. The killer was desperate, making mistakes. As he and Hastings hurried toward the village morgue, the lake loomed in the moonlight, its surface hiding more secrets than it revealed. The net was tightening, and the next chapter would bring Poirot closer to unmasking the culprit. Chapter 5. The Morgue's Midnight Intruder. The night air in Lac Glacé was sharp as a blade as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings hurried through the snow-dusted streets toward the village morgue, their breaths clouding in the moonlight. The news of a break-in at the morgue, where Victor Langdon's body lay, sent a jolt through Poirot's meticulous mind. The killer was growing reckless, and this latest act suggested a desperate need to conceal something on the corpse itself. Poirot's grey cells churned, connecting the weakened ice, the tunnel rope, and the pearl near the lake to this new development. Tonight, he aimed to uncover what the intruder sought, and why. At the morgue, a squat stone building on the village's edge, the local constable, Monsieur Giraud, met them with a scowl. Someone pried open the back window, he growled, pointing to splintered wood and scattered glass. Caught them in the act, but they fled into the woods. Poirot examined the scene, noting muddy boot prints, small, possibly a woman's, leading toward the trees. Inside, Langdon's body lay on a slab, untouched, but for a torn pocket on his coat, as if someone had rifled through it. Poirot's gloved fingers probed the fabric, finding a faint trace of perfume, jasmine, sharp and distinctive. This scent, he murmured to Hastings, I have encountered it before. Perhaps in the hotel. The constable reported a missing scalpel from the morgue's tools, suggesting the intruder was armed and dangerous. Back at the Ice Palace Hotel, Poirot gathered the suspects in the drawing room, his demeanor calm, but his eyes like steel. He questioned them about their whereabouts that evening. Elise Langdon claimed she'd been in her suite, nursing a headache, but her maid, Sophie, hesitated when asked to confirm, her eyes darting to the floor. Rebecca, nursing a brandy, said he'd been playing cards in the bar, corroborated by a waiter who seemed overly eager to agree. Countess Irina Volkov admitted to a late walk but insisted it was near the hotel, not the morgue. Madame Duval, however, was absent during the break-in, supposedly checking inventory in the cellar. Poirot noted her absence and the jasmine perfume lingering on Elise's shawl, though he kept his observations silent for now. Determined to trace the perfume, Poirot visited the hotel's boutique, where a clerk confirmed only 2 guests had purchased jasmine-scented items recently, Elise and Irina. The clue tightened the circle, but Poirot needed more. He returned to the lake, drawn to the boathouse where Sophie had seen Elise's mysterious lover. The structure was weathered, its door ajar. Inside, he found a discarded cigarette butt, its brand foreign. Russian, perhaps, like Irina's origins. A faint scratch on the floor revealed a hidden trapdoor, leading to a shallow crawl space. There, half buried in dust, was a torn scrap of fabric matching Langdon's coat. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered. The lover and the morgue, are they linked? As midnight approached, Poirot sat with Hastings in his room, poring over his notes. The morgue break-in suggested the killer feared evidence on Langdon's body, perhaps a clue to their identity or motive. The jasmine perfume pointed to Elise or Irina, but Madame Duval's absence and Becca's shaky alibi kept them in play. The fabric in the boathouse hinted at a struggle or rendezvous before the murder. "The killer is circling, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "They strike to cover their tracks, but each move reveals more." A sudden creak outside his door made them freeze. A shadow passed under the gap, then vanished. Poirot's hand tightened on his cane. The killer was close, their desperation palpable. The hunt was narrowing, and the next chapter would bring Poirot face to face with a pivotal revelation. Chapter 6. The boathouse betrayal, the dawn of the 5th day in Lac Glacé, brought a restless energy to the Ice Palace Hotel, where the air buzzed with unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, his mind a whirl of clues, the jasmine perfume, the morgue break-in, the fabric scrap in the boathouse, felt the mystery tightening like a noose. The shadow outside his door last night had vanished, but it confirmed the killer's boldness. Today, Poirot resolved to unravel the boathouse's secrets and confront the tangled web of deceit surrounding Elise Langdon's lover, whose identity might unlock the motive behind Victor Langdon's murder. Poirot began at the boathouse, returning to the weathered structure by the lake's edge, under a sky heavy with snow clouds. The trapdoor he'd found yesterday intrigued him. Kneeling, he examined the crawl space more closely, his lantern revealing a glint of metal, a man's cufflink, engraved with the initials AV. The discovery sent a spark through Poirot's grey cells. AV, he murmured. Not Victor Langdon, but perhaps another. He pocketed the cufflink and noticed faint drag marks in the dust, suggesting something, or someone, had been moved. Outside, he spotted a faint trail of crushed pine needles leading toward the woods, where the morgue intruder had fled. The boathouse, he realized, was a nexus of secrets, possibly the site of a clandestine meeting gone wrong. Back at the hotel, Poirot sought out Sophie, Elise Langdon's maid, whose nervous demeanour hinted at withheld truths. In a quiet corner of the servants' quarters, he pressed her gently. "Mademoiselle, the man in the dark coat, describe him." Sophie's hands trembled. Tall with a deep voice, foreign accent, Russian maybe. "I saw him give Madame a locket by the boathouse 2 nights before the murder." A locket? Poirot recalled the tarnished one in the antique display. He retrieved it from Madame Duval, who unlocked the cabinet with a reluctant sigh. The locket contained a tiny photograph of Elise, young and smiling, beside a man with sharp cheekbones. Count Alexei Volkov, Irina's rumoured brother, who'd vanished from Lac Glacé years ago. Was he the lover, and was Irina protecting him? Poirot confronted Countess Irina Volkov in the hotel's music room, where she played a haunting melody on the piano. "Madame, this locket," he said, holding it up. "It ties you to Elise, and perhaps to a man from your past." Irina's fingers froze on the keys, her face a mask. "Alexei is dead," she said flatly. "That locket is a relic, nothing more." But her voice cracked, and Poirot noted the initials AV matched the cufflink. He shifted tactics, questioning Herr Becker about his business dealings with Langdon. Becker, sweating despite the chill, admitted Langdon had threatened to expose a smuggling ring tied to the lake's tunnels. "He wanted to ruin me," Becker growled, but denied any connection to the boathouse or the murder. As evening fell, Poirot and Hastings stood by the lake, the boathouse looming in the twilight. The lover is key, Hastings, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the ice. If Alexei Volkov lives, he links Elise, Irina, and perhaps the tunnels. The cufflink places him, or someone posing as him, at the boathouse. Hastings frowned. But why kill Langdon there with no tracks? Poirot tapped his cane. The ice was a stage, mon ami. The murder was planned to look impossible, to hide the truth of betrayal. A sudden shout interrupted them. A groundskeeper reported finding a bloodied scalpel, the one stolen from the morgue, hidden in a snowbank near the boathouse. Poirot's pulse quickened. The killer's mistakes were mounting. As they returned to the hotel, the wind carried a faint hum, like the grinding noise reported before. Poirot paused, staring at the lake. The ice speaks again, he whispered. The boathouse, the locket, the cufflink, and now the scalpel wove a narrative of passion and revenge. The killer was close, their identity almost within reach. The next chapter would push Poirot to the edge of the truth as the lake's secrets began to surface. Chapter 7. The Locket's Hidden Truth. The 6th day in Lac Glacé dawned with a restless quiet, the village blanketed in fresh snow that muffled all sound, except the distant creak of ice on the lake. Hercule Poirot, his mind a whirl of connections. The cufflink with A.V., the locket tying Elise to a mysterious lover, the bloodied scalpel near the boathouse, felt the mystery's threads tightening. The killer's desperation was palpable, their trail of errors growing. Today, Poirot aimed to uncover the truth behind the locket's photograph and the identity of Alexei Volkov, whose shadow loomed over the murder like a spectre from the past. Poirot began in the hotel's archive room, a dusty alcove where old guest logs and village records were kept. With Madame Duval's reluctant permission, he pored over documents from a decade ago, when Count Alexei Volkov had last visited Lac Glacé. The logs confirmed his stay, alongside a young Elise, then unmarried, and Irina listed as his sister. A faded newspaper clipping caught Poirot's eye, a scandal involving Alexei's disappearance after a smuggling bust linked to the lake's tunnels. So, the Count did not die, Poirot murmured, his grey cells sparking. He vanished, perhaps to escape justice, or to plot revenge. The locket's photograph, showing Elise and Alexei, suggested a romance that might have fueled Victor Langdon's murder. Seeking confirmation, Poirot tracked down Sophie, Elise's maid, in the hotel's laundry room, where steam clouded the air. "Mademoiselle, the man in the locket, when did you last see him?" Sophie's eyes widened, her voice a whisper. 2 nights before the murder, near the boathouse. He wore a dark coat, spoke with Madame Elise in hushed tones. She called him Alexei once, then stopped herself. Poirot pressed further, learning Elise had received a letter that same night, which she burned in her fireplace. He hurried to Elise's suite where a maid was cleaning. In the hearth, he found a charred fragment of paper, barely legible. "Meet me, ice, midnight." The handwriting matched the note found on Langdon's body. Confronting Elise in the hotel's tea room, Poirot presented the locket and the fragment, her face drained of colour, her teacup rattling. "Alexei is a ghost from my past," she stammered. "He wrote to me, yes, but I never met him that night." "I was at the ball." Her denial rang hollow, her hands clutching the jasmine-scented shawl. Poirot then sought Irina Volkov, finding her in the hotel's garden, pruning roses despite the cold. "Madame, your brother lives, does he not?" he asked sharply. Irina's pruning shears paused, her eyes cold. "You chase shadows, Monsieur Poirot. Alexei is gone." But her grip on the shears betrayed tension, and Poirot noted a fresh scratch on her hand, possibly from the morgue's broken window. As dusk fell, Poirot and Hastings walked the lake's perimeter, the ice glowing faintly under the stars. The scalpel's discovery near the boathouse suggested a second crime, or a cover-up. Poirot theorized aloud. Alexei, alive, meets Elise in secret. Langdon discovers their affair, threatens exposure. The murder is planned, using the tunnels and weakened ice to stage an impossible crime. But who wielded the dagger? Hastings frowned. Irina, protecting her brother. Elise, fearing ruin. Poirot nodded. Or another, using Alexei's return as a catalyst. A sudden glint caught his eye. A metal hook embedded in the ice near the boathouse, barely visible. It matched the rope from the storeroom, hinting at a rigged escape route. Back at the hotel, a maid reported overhearing Herr Becker muttering about debts repaid on a telephone call. Poirot's suspicions widened. Becker's smuggling ties could implicate him in Alexei's past and Langdon's death. The locket, the letter, the hook, all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in old grudges. As Poirot retired to his room, a faint creak echoed in the hall, and a new note slid under his door. The ice sees all. The killer was taunting him, but Poirot's resolve hardened. The truth was near, and the next chapter would bring a confrontation that could shatter the case wide open. Chapter 8. The Conspiracy Unraveled. The seventh day in Lac Glacé broke with a howling wind that swept across the frozen lake, rattling the windows of the Ice Palace Hotel and stirring a sense of unease among its guests. Hercule Poirot, fortified by a strong espresso in the hotel's oak-panelled dining room, felt the weight of the case pressing on his meticulous mind. The locket linking Elise to Alexei Volkov, the charred letter fragment, the metal hook in the ice, and the taunting note, "The ice sees all," pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a single killer. The threads of betrayal, smuggling, and revenge were weaving together, and Poirot sensed the truth was within reach. Today, he would confront the suspects with his findings, aiming to provoke a reaction that would expose the mastermind behind Victor Langdon's murder. Poirot began his day at the lake, where the morning light cast long shadows over the ice. The metal hook he'd found near the boathouse intrigued him, a small, sturdy device, likely part of a pulley system tied to the storeroom rope. With Captain Hastings at his side, shivering in his tweed coat, Poirot examined the ice around the hook. He noticed faint scratches radiating outward, as if something heavy had been dragged or lowered. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low. "This hook suggests a mechanism to move across the ice, or beneath it, without leaving tracks." Hastings' eyes widened. "You mean the killer used a rig to stage the body?" Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching. "Precisely. The tunnels, the weakened ice, the rope, all part of an elaborate performance." To confirm his theory, Poirot returned to the tunnel entrance behind the derelict barn, accompanied by Marcel, the ice cutter, who carried a heavy flashlight. The passage was as cold and damp as before, its walls glistening with frost. Deeper in, Poirot found a hidden alcove concealed by a rotting wooden panel. Inside lay a bundle of tools: a chisel, a small drill, and a pair of ice skates, one blade missing its mate. The tools bore traces of ice shavings, matching those from the murder site. "These were used to weaken the ice," Poirot declared, his grey cells racing. "The killer prepared the stage, then used the tunnels to vanish." Marcel, uneasy, muttered about old smuggling tales, hinting that the tunnels were once a hub for illicit goods, perhaps tied to Langdon's and Becker's business dealings. Back at the hotel, Poirot gathered the suspects in the grand ballroom, its chandeliers dimmed by the storm outside. He paced before them: Elise Langdon, Herr Becker, Countess Irina Volkov, and Madame Duval, his cane tapping rhythmically. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but commanding. The murder of Victor Langdon was no act of passion but a calculated plot. The ice was weakened, a rope and hook used to move unseen, and the tunnels provided escape. But why? Elise clutched her shawl, her jasmine perfume sharp in the air. Becker's face reddened, his fists clenched. Irina stared ahead, her lips tight, while Duval's keys jingled nervously in her pocket. Poirot held up the locket. "This connects Madame Langdon to Alexei Volkov." A man thought dead, but very much alive, I suspect. Elise gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He threatened to expose Victor's secrets, she blurted. Smuggling bribes. Victor was no saint, Becker interrupted, his voice booming. Lies! Langdon was the one blackmailing me, threatening to ruin my business. Irina's eyes flashed. You both play innocent, but Victor crossed my family years ago. He deserved his fate. Madame Duval remained silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. Poirot noted each reaction, especially Duval's stillness, too composed. Perhaps. He then revealed the charred letter fragment and the cufflink marked AV. Alexei Volkov was at the boathouse, Poirot said. He met someone, perhaps Elise, perhaps another. The scalpel from the morgue, found near the boathouse, suggests an attempt to destroy evidence. Who among you feared what Langdon's body might reveal? A tense silence followed, broken by a crash, a tray dropped by a waiter eavesdropping nearby. The man, Julien, stammered an apology, but Poirot caught a glance between him and Duval. Was the staff involved? Julien's nervous demeanour and Duval's guarded silence raised new suspicions. As night fell, Poirot and Hastings sat by the fire, piecing together the conspiracy. Alexei's return sparked this, Poirot said, sketching a diagram of the lake and tunnels. He sought revenge on Langdon, perhaps with an accomplice. Elise's affair, Becker's debts, Irina's grudge, Duval's secrets, all intertwine. Hastings frowned. But who struck the blow? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The one who controls the stage, mon ami. The one who knows the lake and its tunnels best. A sudden gust rattled the windows, and a faint grinding sound echoed from the lake, chilling the air. The killer was still active, and Poirot's trap was set. The next chapter would see the final pieces fall as the truth emerged from the ice. Chapter 9. The Trap on the Ice. The 8th day in Lac Glacé brought a deceptive calm, the storm clouds parting to reveal a pale sun that glinted off the frozen lake like a cold accusation. Hercule Poirot, his mind sharpened by the confrontation in the ballroom, felt the case reaching its crescendo. The tools in the tunnel, the locket's secrets, the hook and rope, and the grinding noise from the lake all pointed to a conspiracy orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of the Ice Palace Hotel and its hidden passages. The waiter. Julien's nervous glance at Madame Duval lingered in Poirot's thoughts, suggesting a deeper role for the hotel's staff. Today, he would set a trap to force the killer's hand, using the lake itself as bait. Poirot began in the hotel's kitchen, where Julien was scrubbing pots, his hands trembling under Poirot's gaze. Monsieur Julien, Poirot said softly, you overheard much in the ballroom, no? Perhaps you know more about the night of the murder. Julien's eyes darted to the door, but he mumbled, I only serve drinks, monsieur. Poirot pressed, mentioning the glance exchanged with Duval. Julien flinched, then admitted, Madame Duval, she asked me to watch the guests that night, report anything odd. I saw the Countess near the boathouse, and Herr Becker arguing with someone in the shadows. Poirot noted the information, suspecting Julien was a pawn, but Duval's instructions hinted at her control over the hotel's secrets. To test his theory, Poirot devised a ruse. He spread word through the hotel staff, discreetly but not too discreetly, that he'd discovered a hidden cache in the tunnels containing evidence that would unmask the killer. Tell no one, but let it slip, he instructed Hastings, knowing gossip would reach the culprit. He then enlisted Marcel, the ice cutter, to prepare a section of the lake near the murder site for a staged investigation at dusk. Marcel, grumbling but cooperative, marked a circle on the ice with red paint, claiming it was for safety tests. Poirot ensured the suspects overheard, watching their reactions. Elise paled, Becker fidgeted, Irina's eyes narrowed, and Duval excused herself abruptly, citing a headache. As dusk fell, Poirot and Hastings positioned themselves near the boathouse, hidden in the lengthening shadows. The painted circle on the ice glowed faintly under lanterns, a lure for the killer. Poirot's cane tapped softly as he whispered, "The guilty one will come, Hastings, to destroy or retrieve what they fear I've found." Hours passed, the cold biting through their coats, until a figure emerged from the woods, a cloaked silhouette moving toward the ice. Poirot's heart raced as the figure knelt by the painted circle, chiseling at the ice with a tool. A faint grinding noise echoed, the same sound reported before. Hastings whispered, "It's them," but Poirot signaled for silence, watching as the figure uncovered a small buried object, a leather pouch. Before Poirot could act, a second figure appeared, startling the first. A muffled argument ensued, and the second figure, taller, broader, lunged, knocking the pouch into the snow. Poirot sprang forward, lantern raised, revealing Madame Duval, her face twisted in panic, and Herr Becker, his fists clenched. "Enough," Poirot declared. Duval clutched the pouch, her voice shrill. "It's nothing, just old keepsakes," Becker snarled. "She's lying. She's been blackmailing me." The pouch, when opened, revealed documents, smuggling ledgers implicating Langdon, Becker, and Alexei Volkov, dated years ago. Duval's hands shook. She'd known about the tunnel's use and Langdon's threats to expose it. Poirot's voice cut through the night. "Madame Duval, you orchestrated this murder, using the tunnels and ice to hide your crime. You knew Alexei's return would stir old wounds, and you manipulated Elisa's affair to provoke Langdon's death." Duval's eyes widened, but she said nothing, her silence damning. Becker, sweating, confessed to helping move the body, coerced by Duval's threats. The trap had worked, but Irina and Elisa's roles remained unclear. As the constable arrived to detain Duval and Becker, a distant crack echoed from the lake, a warning of more secrets yet to surface. The final chapter looms, where Poirot will unmask the full truth. Chapter 10. The ice breaks open. The 9th day in Lac Glacé dawned with a brittle clarity, the frozen lake shimmering under a sun that offered no warmth. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand ballroom of the Ice Palace Hotel, his small frame commanding the room as he prepared to unveil the truth behind Victor Langdon's murder. The trap on the ice had ensnared Madame Duval and Herr Becker, but the full tapestry of deceit, woven from the locket, the tunnels, the weakened ice, and the smuggled ledgers, remained to be unraveled. With Elise Langdon, Countess Irina Volkov, and the hotel's staff watching, Poirot's grey cells had pieced together a conspiracy of betrayal, greed, and vengeance. Tonight, he would reveal the killer's identity and the chilling mechanics of the crime, closing Poirot's coldest case. Poirot began by assembling the suspects and key witnesses: Duval, Becker, Elise, Irina, Sophie the maid, and Julian the waiter, in the ballroom, where a fire roared but failed to dispel the tension. He held up the leather pouch from the ice, its smuggling ledgers spread on a table. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, his voice steady. Victor Langdon's death was no solitary act but a symphony of motives, orchestrated by one who knew the lake's secrets. Let us begin with the stage. The ice. He explained how the ice was weakened using tools from the tunnel alcove, a chisel and drill, to create a thin patch where Langdon's body was placed, making footprints unnecessary. The rope and hook, rigged through the tunnels, allowed the killer to move beneath the ice, staging the body via the grate he'd found. Poirot turned to the locket, its photograph of Elise and Alexei Volkov gleaming in the firelight. "Madame Langdon, you loved Alexei years ago, before your marriage to Victor. His return threatened to expose your past." Elise's face crumpled, tears falling. "He wrote to me begging to meet. I refused, but Victor found out." Poirot nodded, holding up the charred letter fragment. "Meet me. Ice. Midnight." This was Alexei's plea, intercepted by another. He faced Irina. "Countess Volkov, you claimed your brother was dead. But he lives, hiding in Lac Glacé. You protected him, knowing his smuggling past tied him to Langdon's crimes. Irina's lips trembled, but she nodded. Alexei wanted revenge. Victor betrayed him, left him to rot after the smuggling bust. Next, Poirot addressed Herr Becker. Monsieur, you were Langdon's pawn, coerced into smuggling through the tunnels to save your failing business. You helped move the body, fearing exposure. Becker slumped, admitting, Duval threatened to ruin me if I didn't help. Poirot's gaze shifted to Madame Duval, her face a mask of defiance. Madame, you are the architect of this murder. As the hotel's manager, you knew the tunnel's every secret. You learned of Alexei's return and saw a chance to eliminate Langdon, who planned to expose your family's smuggling legacy to seize the hotel's land. Duval's eyes blazed, but she remained silent. Poirot revealed the final piece. The dagger. Madame Duval stole the jeweled dagger from the display, knowing its theft would cast suspicion on guests. She lured Langdon to the boathouse, where Alexei confronted him. A struggle ensued, hence the fabric scrap and cufflink marked AV. But it was Duval who struck the fatal blow, using the tunnels to drag the body onto the ice via the rope system. He paused, eyeing Julien. You, monsieur, were her eyes and ears, reporting guest movements, though you did not kill. Julien hung his head, confessing to passing information under Duval's orders. The motive, Poirot explained, was layered. Duval sought to protect her family's legacy and the hotel. Elise's affair gave her a scapegoat. Irina's loyalty to Alexei made her complicit in silence. Becker's desperation made him a tool. Alexei, the catalyst, remains at large, but his role was secondary. Poirot faced Duval. You weakened the ice, staged the body, and broke into the morgue to retrieve a ledger fragment in Langdon's coat. Fearing it implicated you, the constable stepped forward, arresting Duval, who spat. The lake was mine to protect. Becker was detained as an accomplice, while Elise and Irina, though guilty of secrets, faced no charges. As the suspects were led away, Poirot stood by the lake with Hastings, the ice gleaming under the stars. The lake kept its secrets, mon ami, but the truth always rises. Hastings sighed. A chilling case, Poirot. The detective smiled. Indeed, but the grey cells prevail. As the village settled into uneasy peace, Poirot's gaze lingered on the horizon, where Alexei Volkov still roamed, a shadow for another day. If you've enjoyed this frosty tale of deception, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more mysteries,